So I'm a high-level TDS player. In fact, I've been playing for almost 3 years now, and in that time, I've gained a lot of experience on how to play. So in this video, I'll be going over my top 10 things you probably don't do that I, a random guy on the internet, think you should. Alright, tip number 1, the Molotov. Yeah, that really annoying consumable that misses whenever you try it. Well, turns out it's actually good. You see, some enemies in TDS have a defense modifier, and for those of you who care, here's the formula. But in a nutshell, the more defense an enemy has, the less damage your towers will deal. Now, as for the Molotov, when you throw it, it creates a little fire puddle for 10 seconds, which can set the enemies on fire and which will lower their defense by 15% every half a second, which can total up to half of the enemy's defense. Here's an example. You know how the Fallen King gains up to 60% defense as you damage it? Well, if you had 12 max 2 minis attacking it, then you would only be dealing 1900 DPS. But if you use the Molotov, then you can increase it to almost 2400 DPS, which is an extra 450 DPS, or a 23% increase. Oh, and this also works with the Napalm Strike, but the Napalm Strike only gives you 2 uses per match, while the Molotov gives you 5. And because the Molotov is a common consumable, you are a lot more likely to have spare of these than of the Napalm. Tip number 2. So you know how crowd control towers are things like Mortar, Rocketeer and Shotgunner? Well, you can actually use any tower that has a lasting effect as a crowd control tower. Let's take the Toxic Gunner as an example. When it's hit the first, it just poisons the same enemy over and over again. But the poison doesn't stack, it just resets the timer. So you're not actually dealing more damage, you're just keeping the same guy sick, I guess. But if you set it to random, well, now it starts spreading its poison to every enemy it hits, applying its damage over time to multiple targets at once, which can rack up fast since the effect lasts for 10 seconds. While there are only 3 towers this works with, being the Toxic Gunner, Elementalist and Archer, if you use this on towers like the Freezer, you can stall out entire crowds of enemies without needing a lot of towers to do it. Tip number 3. Alright, so you know how there's stalling towers in TDS? Well, unfortunately they don't work on bosses, but thankfully there's a consumable that does, the Flashbang. While it can't fully stop the boss, it can slow them down quite a lot, and since it can be used up to 5 times, you can chain it to last up to 25 seconds total, which may not seem like a lot, but it is. Personally, I recommend using it with melee towers, as the biggest drawback with using them is that the enemies get out of range fast. But if the boss is stalled, then you can keep it in there for longer and deal a lot more damage since melee towers tend to have very high DPS to make up for the short range. Tip number 4. Alright, this is a short one, but you know DJ's green track ability? The one that gives you free money? Well, on paper it's great, but let's be honest, we all keep forgetting to use it when it's available. Thankfully, there's a way to use it without thinking, and it's by using a keybind. If you go to the settings menu and set the keybind to W, A, S or D, then every time you walk around, you're just getting free money. You basically start farming cash automatically, because you use the ability whenever you move. Tip number 5. Targeting is one of the most underrated yet complicated skills in TDS, and it can make the difference between winning or losing, because it allows you to optimize your damage output without spending any extra money. Take the Ranger for example. At max level, it deals 1000 damage when it shoots, but that's only if it hits an enemy with at least that much health. I mean, it can't deal 1k damage to an enemy with only 800 health. Because of this, you want to set the Ranger to strongest, because then it will always be using as much of its damage as it can whenever it shoots. Another good example are crowd control towers that shoot projectiles, like the Mortar or Rocketeer. Since it deals damage to all enemies in the explosion area, the more enemies it hits, the more damage it deals. Because of this, you want to set these towers to random, because then it will be more likely to shoot those projectiles into the crowds of enemies, and because it deals the damage to all of them, then it will deal a lot more damage than when it just shoots to one. Hey, before we get back to the video, I'm trying to reach 2.5 thousand subscribers to unlock the content creator name tag, so if you like this video, then maybe consider subscribing. Also, check out my Discord where you'll be able to chat with me, get notified for my new videos, and you'll be able to give your own feedback on my upcoming content. Anyway, back to the video. Tip number 6. Okay, so this tip is more of a way to look and feel like a pro, but memorizing which targeting options are which can let you retarget towers fast. Imagine placing your mortar and scrolling through all the different options until you find the random targeting right at the end. Well, if you memorize the different options, you can find whichever one you want, and since there are only 4 of them that you really should need, being 2 to the left for furthest, 1 to the left for random, 1 to the right for last, and 2 to the right for strongest. Tip number 7. Alright, so you know how pros seem to know exactly what towers they need to upgrade before even checking? Well, it's because they use skins that have obvious levels. Take the Xmas farm for example. Every single level is unique enough that you can tell which level it is just at a quick glance, so you can easily tell which of these farms isn't level 3 yet. However, if you use something like the Graveyard Farm, only the max level really stands out, so it's a lot harder to tell which of these isn't level 3. Tip number 8. One of the easiest ways to improve a TDS is just by knowing what enemies spawn on which waves. You don't need to memorize the entire wave structure, but knowing a few key ones like when hiddens first show up, or when flying enemies first appear, well, it lets you prepare in advance so you don't die. Take wave 22 on Fallen for example. That's when the first flying enemies come out. So instead of panicking and scrambling to place the one thing that you can afford with flying detection, you can just have better towers already that have flying detection. I mean, it's the same thing with the Fallen Shield on wave 30, or the Fallen Honor Guard on wave 35. If you prepare in advance, then you don't die. Tip number 9. Alright, so you know how some towers in TDS are just good at one thing? Like Ranger is great for damage, Freeze is great for support, and Farm is great for money? Well, there's also a group of towers that aren't good at one thing, you know, Jotes, or Jack of all trades. And by using them properly, you can actually save slots in your loadout. Take the Elementalist for example. It has 2 modes which it can switch between, Fire and Frost, where Fire applies additional burn damage, and Frost applies chillness to enemies to slow them down. There's 2 effects in one tower, Ice and Fire, so you're basically getting a Freezer and a Pyro in one slot. Another example is the Electroshocker. I mean, everyone knows it stalls enemies with chain stuns, but it also hits flying and lead enemies, which means that you can use it as a support tower for ground and air at the same time, which is super useful in modes like Hardcore or Fallen, where you don't have a lot of space, and since it has its chain, it can actually deal with crowns pretty easily as well. Tip number 10. Okay, so we all know consumables are overpowered, but I don't mean things like nukes or mortal monsters. I mean things like early game consumables, you know, grenades and barricades, because you can use them instead of defending. It's quite obvious, but if you spend your money on farms instead of defenses, you'll have a lot more money later on, because you'll be able to max out your farm so much earlier, and that extra money can allow you to get a couple extra axels and NGs. And sure, you can just use a nuke at the end, but here's the thing, a nuke does what, 50,000 damage? Well, if you use the money to max out a few towers instead, you deal way more than that over the time. Plus, it's a lot more reliable to have constant tower that automatically shoots for you than a nuke that you need to use right on time just to make sure you don't die. And that's all of the tips I've got. Let me know if you thought they were good down in the comments, and massive thanks to my first ever member Superlab, and shout out to my first tier 3 member, Maybe Tigger. Oh, and if you like this video, I've got a lot more stuff like it on the channel, so maybe go check that out while you're here. Anyway, thanks for watching and goodbye.